Certainly there's no doubt that 70% of Jewish students feel harassed, they feel threatened. And unfortunately, I found that in my home state. At the University of Kansas, I went and sat down and visited with the Jewish students there. And when these riots and protests were going on, to Senator Collins' point, the leaders of the riots were actually teachers there and graduate students and outsiders showing them how to do this type of rioting. The students were being followed into their classrooms. The protesters, the class, maybe it was a class in Jewish history, and the protesters were inside the buildings, outside the class, harassing these students. And certainly this is all very, very unacceptable. Dr. Small, what was Qatar's role in the hostage release of Americans?
It's a good question. I'm not an expert at that level, but I know that the Qataris certainly were funding Hamas. They have very good relations.
Okay, that's not my question. I'll answer the question for you. Sure. So the Qataris were vastly responsible for the freeing of American hostages and many others. Dr. Small, what was Qatar's role in the evacuation of Afghanistan, and especially how did it impact America?
The Qatari regime has good relations with the Taliban, with the Iranian revolutionary regime. And
it's interesting,
Hamas.
Just the prejudice that I hear coming out of your mouth here, that Qatar was so important. Of the 120,000 people evacuated from Afghanistan in our moment of need, Qatar stood beside us, and of the 120,000 removed, 60,000 of them came through Qatar. Without Qatar, we would have had thousands more deaths as well. So I don't know why you won't answer that question. So there's no doubt that 70% of Jewish students feel harassed, they feel threatened. And unfortunately, I found that in my home state. At the University of Kansas, I went and sat down and visited with the Jewish students there. And when these riots and protests were going on, to Senator Collins' point, the leaders of the riots were actually teachers there and graduate students and outsiders showing them how to do this type of rioting. The students were being followed into their classrooms. The protesters, the class, maybe it was a class in Jewish history, and the protesters were inside the buildings, outside the class, harassing these students. And certainly this is all very, very unacceptable. And I'm glad that we're proceeding this. I think there's a great opportunity for some type of an anti-Semitic commission going forward. This problem was happening 2,000 years ago. It's going to keep happening, and we need to keep this in mind as well. I want to go to Dr. Small first. Dr. Small, what was Qatar's role in the hostage release of Americans?
It's a good question. I'm not an expert at that level, but I know that the Qataris certainly were funding Hamas. They have very good relations.
Okay, that's not my question. I'll answer the question for you. Sure. So the Qataris were vastly responsible for the freeing of American hostages and many others. Dr. Small, what was Qatar's role in the evacuation of Afghanistan, and especially how did it impact America?
The Qatari regime has good relations with the Taliban, with the Iranian revolutionary regime. And
it's interesting,
Hamas.
Just the prejudice that I hear coming out of your mouth here, that Qatar was so important. Of the 120,000 people evacuated from Afghanistan in our moment of need, Qatar stood beside us, and of the 120,000 removed, 60,000 of them came through Qatar. Without Qatar, we would have had thousands more deaths as well. So I don't know why you won't answer that question. I want to think about just a little bit more objective here. I'm going to say this century, in the past decade or so, Qatar has given about $5 billion to the educational institutions of America. And a vast majority of that, probably 80%, is setting up universities in Qatar. Whether it's Texas A&M in engineering, Cornell in medicine, a vast amount of that money is research-oriented as well. Qatar's been a great ally to America, so I don't know why you're attacking them. And then why don't you compare? So China's given over $3 billion, the Saudis $1.5 billion, UK $1 billion, Germany over $1 billion. So why aren't we attacking them as well? And I want you to answer this question. 2 universities, heavily funded by Qatar, were Carnegie Mellon and VCU. Were there any large anti-Semitic riots or protests there?
So look, this is a very important issue, and I would say...
So were there any anti-Semitic riots or protests in VCU or Carnegie Mellon? The answer is no. So the answer is no. So they were vastly funded, but yet there was no riots there. So I don't understand why you're picking on the Qataris here when other people are funding. Take Texas and Texas A&M. Texas A&M has a university presence in Qatar. University of Texas doesn't. So you would make the conclusion that Texas A&M was funded, but UT is where the riots were. UT had nothing to do with Qatari funding there. I don't know how causation doesn't, what's my saying here that Senator Cass uses all the time here?
What is association is not necessarily causation.
There you go. Association is not causation. So I don't know why we're here fueling the fire. Not all Muslims are anti-Semitic. Not all Muslims are anti-American. And here we have a Muslim country that has stood beside America for the most part, and they're not perfect. They're not perfect, but they help us get back hostages. They saved the day in Afghanistan. In so many ways, they've stood beside us. I think you're picking on them. I think you're coming to conclusions that are not well-founded. I think that that's called discrimination. I think it's prejudiced as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
May I respond, please? May I answer the question?
In 26 seconds.
Pardon me?
Oh,
I would just say that Qatar is a country with less than 350,000 citizens. They give more money to American universities than any country in the world. The greatest victims of political radical Islam are Muslims.
But you're missing the rest of the story, though. See, here, this just continues the prejudice that you have. You don't mention China, you don't mention Saudi, you don't mention the UK. They all have significant donations as well. Look, nobody is perfect. And I know that you built your life on this one thing, but no country is perfect. And I'm as pro-Israel as any member is up here. I'm certainly recognize the anti-Semitism that's been around for over 2,000 years. I don't know why you want to use an anti-Semitic term, I don't know why you want to make Qatar the scapegoat here.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Marshall. Senator Baldwin. I assume I don't have your list over here. Are you next?
I was not here at the gavel.
Oh, good. Then Senator Hassan.
Hate to admit that. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank the chair and the ranking member for this hearing today. Before I turn to my questions, I want to say a few words regarding the alarming and disturbing anti-Semitism that we are seeing across the country. Vigorous debates regarding foreign policy are constitutionally protected, but too often since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, these debates and protests have veered into both implicit and explicit anti-Semitism. Across the country, Jewish centers on campus have been protested and vandalized, and Jewish faculty and administrators have been targeted. At one school, Jewish students had to be escorted by security to escape a mob. And too often during protests, we've heard chants and slogans that justify and even celebrate Hamas's violence, or heard speakers deny Hamas's atrocities, including the atrocity of sexual violence. There is no legal right to threaten the safety of any student. Even if someone has a legal right to say hateful words, it's still wrong to say them. And the rest of us have the right and responsibility to condemn them. Denouncing anti-Semitism should not be a partisan issue. Whether by torchlight in Charlottesville or on the quads of our universities, anti-Semitism is always, always wrong and entirely at odds with what our country is supposed to be, what people like my dad, who served in World War II, knew America could be. The fact that we are seeing this kind of anti-Semitism today, in today's day and age, is shameful, and a reminder, obviously, that we need to do much, much better. Because extremism, no matter what fringe it comes from, doesn't go away on its own. And frankly, on this issue and others in our politics today, I do fear that the further we are removed from World War II, the more likely we are to forget the lessons that many paid a terrible price for all of us to learn. I was going to ask the same question that Senator Murray did, about the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education, an incredibly important office. I was grateful, Rabbi, for your description of how it has been undermined and what the impact of that will be, and Mr. Stern, yours as well. It's an incredibly important tool. It is extremely disappointing, more than disappointing. It is wrong that this administration has worked to undermine it so quickly and so strongly, and it is at odds with the administration's rhetoric about wanting to do something about anti-Semitism on our campuses. But I do have a couple of other questions, and Rabbi Saperstein, I want to start with you. In your testimony, you highlight the importance of strengthening resources for security of our religious and communal institutions. We've made progress in recent years by creating the Nonprofit Security Grant Program at the Department of Homeland Security, which helps to address the security needs at houses of worship, but there's still more work to do. Senator Johnson and I have a bill called the Pray Safe Act, which would establish a federal clearinghouse through which faith-based organizations, houses of worship, and other nonprofits could access information on safety and security best practices, available federal grant programs, and training opportunities. The Pray Safe Act passed out of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee by unanimous consent last Congress. I invite my colleagues to work with me in getting it signed into law this Congress. Rabbi, can you speak to how a centralized, easy-to-navigate clearinghouse like this would help you and other faith leaders? And also, if there are other supports you'd like to see us work to provide, please comment on those.
Well, thank you for your comments at the beginning about the state of where we are with anti-Semitism. Agreed with everyone. We're hearing things I never thought we would hear again after the Holocaust. We're seeing things I never thought I would see in my lifetime. So thank you so much for that. I spent much of my career working with the National Reform Jewish Movement, the largest movement. I think I can speak for all of the movements, that kind of clearinghouse is invaluable to us. We have nearly 900 synagogues around the country here, and they desperately need guidance. They desperately need to know what best practices are here. This is a safety that they have to worry about every single time they gather, every single time they pray, every single time they teach, every single time they provide social services to the community. So it would be an invaluable contribution.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I have very little time left, but I do just want to comment that one step I think we can take to counter the hate we are seeing is investing in Holocaust education programs so that our young people understand the evils that drive anti-Semitism. So I will submit a question for the record to you, Rabbi Shemtov, about the role that Holocaust education can play in fighting the spread of anti-Semitism. Thank you.